In 2024, my next guest was preparing a solo exhibition entitled Meet Me Here. Laura Purcell asked me to photograph her work as support pieces for the exhibition. Of course I said yes. After all, not only is she a wonderful artist, she's also my partner. Besides, I love environmental portraits. The process of photographing another person's work is challenging. Not only does it require understanding the work, it also requires a mutual respect of processes and picking up on cues to enable creativity in the photography. Hi Laura.
Hi Pete.
Welcome to a somewhat different edition of On Location. I really wanted to talk about the process of how we documented your exhibition and kind of where I sat within there and what your expectations were. Could you give a brief description of Meet Me Here and what your expectations were?
Wow, jumping back. Meet Me Here was an exhibition that included sculpture, photography and video. In particular, I needed to create something with my hands that involved just being able to be in the studio for longer periods of time, which was able to give me time and space to sit with myself and think my own thoughts and just to clear out the noise and then really explore flow. And so Meet Me Here was all about tide and being me, a woman, when the tide's out, what happens? When the tide's in, what happens? The moon, the Devonport Regional Gallery that I exhibited at, I was inspired by the Moon collection, which was collected by three sisters going back to Scotland back in the late 1800s. So I was really intrigued by the dress, and the way that they were handmade and sewn, but also the people who are invisible in society and the labour that they provide to keep society afloat.
Why did you initially talk to me about doing the photography for the work?
Well, I really like your work and I've been observing how you work, and we have collaborated in the background on things, exploring how we could work together without really going, oh, we're going to work together. And I really admire the way you approach a scenic landscape. I have less control over what's happening in the background or the composition or lighting or things like that. And then I wanted video because I pitched to the gallery that I was going to have a video. And I've done video before and I've self-filmed and self-edited. And you know, it's very experimental. It's learn as we go. But as I was making in the studio, I felt like I was getting further and further away from being able to make the video. And then I thought I will just go with the one large decal at the end of wallpaper decal at the end of the gallery.
That's right.
But then it was in discussion with the curator, who's really wonderful, Elena Evans, that I was able to bring back the video again. And having that video there really enhanced and connected in everything with the photography and the static sculptures.
Well, we had 2 locations in mind to begin with, and we ended up with 4. I remember the first one that I looked at was Spring Beach because you were very excited by it after a visit with Nadia. What was it about Spring Beach that just drew you in?
I think it was the tapestry of the rock formations, the geology, and you know, looking down. It was like a tapestry, and there were little carved out holes, and it really just sparked my imagination. And also in particular the way that the tide went out and the seaweed. So all these imprints that were left, and it really spoke to how I'd been working in the studio as well.
I was blown away by just this big, flat, rock. It looked like molten lava. Absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And I had some ideas off the bat, and I did a little video because I thought I'd be able to use it as content for my YouTube channel. But going back there with you, it was a whole different experience because putting you into the landscape changed the way I looked at everything.
Do you think I activated that space, like the presence of a body was able to activate and tell a new story?
Oh, absolutely, because I only had my imagination when I went there the first time. And I remember those two rocks that were split apart. I knew that was somewhere that we could use, but my imagination was nothing compared to when we had you there, and then we could actually look at where the camera could go, and by that time we had drone footage as well. And yeah, so it absolutely changed everything. So the first time we went, everything was underwater.
Yeah.
Which
Tide was high.
Total rookie mistake.
Well, it was a super moon.
Yeah.
The tide was high, the waves were high and rolling in like big barrel waves.
We had about this much shoreline to work with. It was pretty tight. And even though the water wasn't very deep, when those waves came in, they could knock you around for sure. What were you thinking when we got there?
What am I going to do? I think the whole time I was trying to get out of my head, actually. And I think you were my head. I was hoping, which is why you being the photographer was about the head in looking, seeing the observation. I mean, I was there doing that too, but you'd already seen the location. So just problem solve this while I problem solve what am I actually doing in front of the camera, because I was really worried about over-performing, hamming it up too much, or not enough. So there was a lot of problem solving that I had to do from a performative and personal perspective. So it was really wonderful that you were able to have that outside eye.
I didn't understand your work at that point. So I was just trying to find good compositions. I was also stupidly trying to do some behind the scenes for a video, which kind of threw me out a little bit, and I kind of just plonked the camera down and tried to forget about that. But we also had your camera because you wanted to get some footage, and I'd never used your camera before, for video. The classic shot where that you got splashed, that was taken with the Canon, and all the settings were wrong. It's overblown and washed out, and it's awful. So I had all that going in my mind as well, and we got a good photo out of it.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah,
photo.
Which was amazing, and that was part of you hamming that up as well.
Well, that was a moment of hamming it up, in a little moment of becoming quite energised, I guess, because I felt quite frozen because I was, again, in my head trying to work out what am I doing, am I overdoing it or not? And I guess from a model perspective as well, or an artist perspective, this is what's going on. And sometimes direction, but it was hard because I'm directing.
That's
it's
right.
It's my work, but it's kind
and we were far enough away that communication wasn't easy.
Well, it was also interesting because we had to discuss how we will communicate from long distance. I think we established a bit of a rhythm in that moment too.
We headed up to Goat Island for our main shoot. We'd booked it well in advance, and we didn't have any idea of what the tides were doing, but we knew we were going to be there long enough for us to get high and low tides. But we had no idea what the weather was going to do. We kind of just went in pretty much unprepared.
That's how I roll.
But we did scout it out on the night we got up there. We scouted it out there and we didn't take any photos as such, and we just sort of had a look around while the tide was low so that we could then go back for the low tide a bit later. What was it about Goat Island that made you want to shoot there?
Again, the geology, the rock formations.
That was insane.
It's insane. Tasmania's insane for amazing geology. Like there's so many different styles and types. The way that the tide went out and came back, and being able to be in an environment that it takes your imagination somewhere else. I love the fact that you could go onto the island. There's just lots of nooks and crannies, and I think it's the playfulness. It just captured my imagination. And the moonscape, again, a play on words, but it seemed to just all be a little bit serendipitous. And I think that's what happens with my work. I just find these threads and then they come together, and I try not to be too over the top. How could communicating that with you to be able to show what I was thinking of, but then also trust your eye as well.
Now, we did have some communication issues though, didn't we?
No. No, we really flowed.
Oh, yeah. Because I still didn't quite understand what was going on with your work. And it wasn't until much later. Like, we had conversations after that day, and then I started to begin to understand.
I was struggling because normally I would be able to communicate a photo shoot for somebody else's photo shoot. Yep, we need to do this, this, this. You need that, this, this.
Yep.
But suddenly I couldn't do any of that. I think, it was really hard for me to communicate that with you. But you were very patient in...
Well, I wanted to get the shot.
Yeah.
And the only way to get the shot was to make sure that I understood what you needed. And there's no point getting, like, tense. I was trying to understand. And it was difficult because you were still concentrating on what you needed to do, and I needed to find the angles and everything. But, I mean, all that aside, the light was amazing. The water level was, I think, just right. And we hadn't planned it at all, because this was dawn. The water was just what the water was. And it was just lapping around these tiny little islands of jagged rocks. When that sun came up, it just lit everything up.
It was beautiful.
Absolutely stunning. And we got 2 pieces, like 2 photographs for the exhibition out of that.
Even one where I looked at you and went, why are you over there? Why are you photographing me from that direction?
Yeah.
And you're like, because it looks good. And I'm like, yeah, right. Well, that made it into the paper, that picture.
Yeah.
Like...
That's the one.
That's the one.
Yeah.
But I think it's just about flow, and it was about finding the flow. And I think once we were there and the sun came up and then the light inspired you, and then we were able to then just work that.
Yeah.
And sometimes, we had to work really quickly. Look, the whole thing was an experiment.
For sure.
And it is being able to be open to that and having those tense moments, having those like dud moments.
That's right. And the second part of the shoot really was a bit of a dud, wasn't it?
Yeah, it got really hot, and the sun was really
So
high.
harsh.
Very harsh. It just felt uncomfortable in that space. I couldn't wear bare feet at all anywhere in that location.
Yeah.
Like the ground and the
Well,
rock.
all the
was
rocks were kind of like that,
all
weren't they?
gnarly, very
Yeah.
gnarly. Visually amazing. Like we wanted to go around the island where there were more gnarlier bits, and it kind of really would have enveloped the body.
There was one other shot we got, which was around the picnic point campsite with some of your little objects.
Yeah.
And that was very much driven by you. I was just there with the camera in hand to get the right angle. Like, you were able to place them so that we could get the shot.
Once I wasn't in front of the camera...
Oh, yeah, you're fine.
I'm fine. And this is, I've had a long background in performing and being in front of people on the stage. It should be natural. It felt really hard because I think I've been trying to find something new, something that I don't know about myself through that. that's what art is.
Yeah.
In that sense, it's about finding something new, and I didn't want to recreate something or go, oh, feel safe in that space. So I think feeling, vulnerable. I was feeling quite vulnerable actually in those moments. But yeah, going back to being able to arrange an object and compose something and, direct you, felt great. Easy.
Beginning of December, we still had a couple of locations to shoot. I didn't quite know the scope of what we were doing, and maybe you didn't either, but as we were getting closer and we were talking more about the video and the video wall, we had to come up with a bit more of a concept, and we needed 4 locations. And I suggested Fossil Cove. And you're a little bit resistant to it, I recall. But it came to the point where we just had to do something, and so we went. What did you think when we got down there?
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Again, I was vulnerable, not sure what I was doing, and I put myself and made myself a peach velvet suit with horns on it. So I thought,
just for the shoot.
There are people hanging around nearby, and it was again another space, a scene, and we were talking about postcard scenarios, so video postcards.
Yeah. In hindsight, the location was very much like a contemplative space, and really encouraged self-reflection, I think.
I definitely like to respond to the space. So as I've mentioned before, I think it plays with my imagination depending on where I am. And so it's like a set. When I was a kid, when I used to visit our family in Devonport, my cousins and my brothers and sister and I would go on the rocks, and we would have our areas where they would be our areas, our homes, and we would create these imaginary spaces within these rock formations. And I didn't think about that at the time, and it's really only just come about recently. Maybe that's a connection. Your imagination can just go wild. And I've always built sets in my head, or and I've always been in sets for theatre shows and things like that. And suddenly you think about what the audience is seeing and how you're creating that scene for that audience. So that's how my mind's operating at the time. So when we went to Fossil Cove, when we went to Fossil Cove, it was, again, this wonderful space, set, contained, looking out onto the river, and then having my props. So in that sense, it did feel very theatrical.
Fossil Cove, I think, was where we really started to focus on the video. And I know I took some still photos. They were okay, but I don't think I really got anything much out of it. The video was amazing, and we got quite a lot of footage out of that, and that was our first section of the video as well. That was also where I discovered, because I'm still learning to use DaVinci Resolve, and that's where I discovered that I could composite 2 pieces of video into one, which really made the scene. And it was wonderful because you were very still and contemplative, and you were doing the sewing, which is what you'd planned to do, but everything was so calm and measured, and it was really lovely. Things were really ramping up, and the next week we went back to Spring Beach. I don't think we were looking at photography at all, and it was just about getting the video finished. But it was great because first of all, the tide was out. All of the scenes that I had thought about when I first scouted, we could actually use those locations, albeit differently. But so the 2 boulders that I was talking about put you on the other side, and there was this nice sweeping drone shot just going across, and then again just something closer up so that you could get the feeling of being in a tight space. But the other side was so open, and you're looking out, and then the drone coming around the other side.
Well, and also I'd originally made the costume as a skirt, and then suddenly it was like, oh, let's just put it around my shoulders, or and it really just changed the whole look and feel. So just shifting just an element of costume, and then the way, the angle, and having that movement, and actually me being still in that space too, and let the camera roll.
And a lot of the work was, in fact, I think maybe all of it was drone footage.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, because you had some ideas on some of the drone work as well, didn't you?
I really wanted to really see, because the dress that I'd created, that was inspired by the waves of the algae kelp imprinted into the sand. I wanted to be able to have that mirrored with the costume, and it seemed like it would be great if the drone was above or moved past or something without being too overdone, I guess. You went with it, that's the other thing.
For sure. I think the biggest challenge was shooting footage without showing any of the modern sort of infrastructure, and because there were buildings off in the distance over the water, and if we went from the other angle there were houses all the way along the shore. We did some tight contained shots, but we also managed to get some big wide shots, especially with the drone from above, because you had that entire rock platform, and it gave this major sense of scale. So you were this tiny person in this massive landscape.
A microcosm.
When I got into the editing process, that really gave a sense of space and gave a sense of wandering as well. The last location, which was just down the road here, at I call it Cartwright Point. It's a little bit further, but there was still that contemplation where you're looking out over the water, and we were so lucky we got that small band of rainbow just at the right moment. And there was jumping around and then walking off into the distance, and I think that just worked really well.
So just that learn as we go, a work in progress, but also learning how to communicate keywords to you so you had something to work with, as opposed to
what the hell are we doing?
No, or Laura saying, no, I don't like that. No, not that, not that, not that. So you're trying to work out what it is. But even then I was also trying to work out what is it, because I could see what it wasn't, but I couldn't see what it was. And I think that moment of me on that rock was a really poignant moment. And I get emotional every time I think about it, because I mean, it's a beautiful image. I'm caught off guard, and you've captured a moment, and it doesn't feel contrived.
And I think that's from the level of trust that we have in each other, and it's not to do with our bigger relationship. This is more of a relationship between an artist and a photographer.
Yeah, that doesn't come into it.
Having had that experience and understanding that as a photographer I need to understand the work, I'm now able to do this for other people.
How soon in the process do you need to be involved in an artist's work if you were to photograph them?
I need a clear idea of what it is that they're trying to say, and in that early stage, certainly from watching you.
Where do you get your own live-in photographer, and like you said, where do you get your own live-in artist? And that was a unique situation, and we tried something out, and I think we've started a new language based on that, part of our practices.
Final thoughts?
Final thoughts. All I can say is thank you so much for your patience and your understanding, and your eye and your sensitivity to the landscape and the environment around you, and just, yeah, really patient. Thank you.
And I was so happy just to get those photos up in that space.
I think, you know, when you talk about it, like when everyone talks about a solo show and, yeah, the artist is at the forefront, a solo show is never a solo show.
That's right.
And behind every great artist is a huge team of people, or from the gallery staff to the photographer, the family, everyone is supporting.
The sequin sewer.
The sequin sewer that I got the fabric from, the pattern. There's there's so much involved, and so many people involved in that.
Keeping in mind all that we've talked about, I'm going to show the video in full.
This is lovely. Thank you so much to be able to discuss and share the process. It's new. It's a new process, and every process in a collaborative sense is always new.
And I hope that people get something out of this. You know, I have a photography channel, and I want people to understand that there's more to photography than just getting out there and taking pictures, depending on the work that you're doing. And when there's other people involved, there is that communication and collaboration and all, you know, everything. If you want to hear more from Laura about creativity, you can tune into her podcast with her friend Nadia. It's called Creative Rumble. There'll be a link in the description below to visit the podcast, along with Laura's website and all of her socials. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.